They said it was wrong. They said it would never last. But hearts don't listen to rules. What started as silence became a story too powerful to stay hidden. You're listening to Hidden Truth Tales. She kissed her, and everything changed, not just their lives, but the truth they were hiding from. They thought one photo would destroy everything. Our careers, our lives, our future, and it did, just not the way they expected. We lost everything the world said mattered, but found something stronger in the ruins, a love no rules could erase. If you want to see how it all fell apart, and how we built it back even stronger, watch till the end, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that dare to go too far. The email glowed on my phone like a verdict already decided. I paused halfway up the stairs, body locked in place. Down below, Taryn stared at her screen, all color drained from her face. Kyungi's hand rose to her mouth as if to hold something in. The air thickened. No one moved. No one dared to speak. Silence pressed in from every side until it became unbearable. Taryn broke it first. Her voice came out controlled, almost too controlled, the kind that hides a tremor underneath. She placed her phone down with a slight shake in her hand and told us to sit in the living room. We obeyed without argument. We fell into the same positions as before, them together on the couch, me alone across from them. But everything had shifted. The distance between us wasn't just space anymore. It carried weight. When she spoke again, it was with precision, stripped of emotion. She explained the process step by step, like delivering a lecture instead of confronting a crisis. Separate interviews, examination of messages, review of grades, any hint of favoritism, any trace of something inappropriate, and everything would collapse. Kyungi leaned forward, urgency breaking through her composure, asking for the exact wording. I pulled up the email and read it aloud. Formal language, polite tone. But underneath it, accusation. Someone had reported us. The word anonymous settled like a stone in my chest. It meant there was a watcher. Someone who had seen something. Someone who knew enough to be dangerous. We needed a story. And quickly, Taryn constructed it with cold efficiency. I needed a place to stay. True. They offered help. True. There was nothing else between us. That part hung in the air, heavy with its own contradiction. We rehearsed until it sounded natural. Clean, consistent, safe. Then the thought slipped out before I could stop it. What if they asked about the kiss? Everything went still again. Taryn dismissed it, said no one knew, that it had happened within these walls where no eyes could reach. But certainty didn't sit well in her voice. It wavered just slightly. From that moment on, the rules were absolute. Distance in every form. No touch, no private words, no closeness, even inside the house that had once felt like refuge. Strangers again. I looked toward Kyungi, but she wouldn't meet my gaze. That night stretched endlessly. Sleep never came. The house echoed with small, restless sounds. Footsteps, doors, running water. Proof that none of us had escaped the tension. What we had shared felt unreal now, like something that belonged to another version of our lives. I wanted to break the silence, to go downstairs and say anything at all, but the boundaries held firm. Survival meant restraint. Survival meant pretending morning came too quickly. I left before anyone else, choosing to walk instead of waiting for something that wasn't coming anymore. In class, everything felt wrong. I took a seat in the back instead of where I used to sit. Taryn didn't acknowledge me, not even a glance. She moved through her lecture with practiced ease, her voice steady, her presence distant. She spoke about storytelling, about what remains unseen, about the tension created in the spaces between truth and omission. It felt less like a lesson and more like a warning. After class, I lingered, watching other students gather around her. She gave them her attention, her patience, the same things she had once given me without hesitation. When the room emptied, her eyes found mine for a single brief moment before she walked away. The investigation office was exactly what I expected. Colorless, sterile, impersonal. We arrived separately, sat apart. Avoided even the smallest acknowledgement of connection. When it was my turn, the questions came calmly, professionally, each one designed to peel something back. I answered carefully, sticking to the version we had built. Every word measured, every pause controlled, temporary housing. Academic relationship only, no favoritism. No impropriety. The truth reshaped into something acceptable. When it ended, there was no accusation, no immediate consequence. Just a warning. Boundaries must remain clear. Any further concern would escalate things beyond control. I walked out with unsteady hands. After that, everything felt watched. Conversations carried an edge. Glances lingered too long. Even casual interactions seemed loaded with hidden meaning. At home, the distance remained. Voices stayed low. Doors stayed closed. The house that once felt safe turned into something suffocating. Then the message came unone number. Same cold certainty. A reminder that someone was still there, still watching, still convinced they knew the truth. Fear returned instantly, sharper this time. We checked windows, closed curtains, moved carefully through our own space as if it no longer belonged to us. Days passed. Then more. No new messages. No new threats. Slowly the tension eased. Breathing became easier. The silence began to feel less like danger and more like absence. Maybe it had been nothing more than intimidation. Maybe it was over. Then everything shifted again. Tehran came downstairs with a different expression. Something lighter, almost disbelieving. The news came quietly but carried weight. Her position was secured. A future locked in place. Relief spread through the room, cautious at first, then real. Kyungi embraced her. For a moment, things felt almost normal again. From where I stood, the distance still remained. But something else slipped through it. Relief, yes, but also something fragile and unspoken. Hope, trying to exist in a place where it wasn't supposed to. No messages came, no new threats. The silence felt like proof that we had made it through. Kungmi let out a small smile, fragile but real, and said she wanted one night without fear hanging over us. Karen's eyes shifted toward me, searching for agreement. I felt the same quiet exhaustion, the same need to breathe again, and I nodded. That evening, we gathered in the back garden. It was small and enclosed, hidden behind brick and hedges that made it feel cut off from the rest of the world. Kungmi brought a bottle of wine. Taran carried the glasses. I came with nothing but the heaviness I hadn't been able to shake for weeks. The night air was cool, the sky clear enough for stars to push through the city glow. Kyungi raised her glass first, her voice steady but softer than usual, marking survival as something worth acknowledging. I added another reason, Taran's achievement, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled without restraint. It wasn't guarded or distant. It was real. We drank. The wine tasted richer than anything I had ever had, maybe because it carried relief with it. Conversations started small, safe topics that didn't threaten to reopen anything fragile. Classes, students, passing remarks about the weather. Slowly, the edges softened and the conversation deepened. The future crept back in. Taran mentioned the hearing, still weeks away, a reminder that nothing was fully resolved. I admitted I had started looking for somewhere else to live. The words felt heavy, leaving my mouth. They pushed back gently. There was no rush, they said. There was still time. But I knew I couldn't stay indefinitely. The situation was temporary, always meant to be. Then Taran offered something unexpected. Help. Financial support, enough to make leaving easier. It cracked something open inside me. The question slipped out, quiet and uncertain, asking why they would go that far. Kyungi leaned closer, her answer simple and honest. It was because they cared. Taran echoed it, softer, but with more weight. What we had wasn't distant anymore. It hadn't been for a while. The air shifted again, different this time. Warmer, Kyungi's hand found mine, steady and grounding. Taran moved closer, her presence brushing against me, close enough to erase the space we had forced between us. A quiet protest surfaced, more reflex than conviction. But it didn't hold. Everything felt softer. The fear, the rules, the distance we had been holding on to so tightly. I admitted what I hadn't allowed myself to say before, that I didn't want to leave. Not really. Taran's response came without hesitation. Her hand lifted to my face, gentle but certain. Kyungi leaned in, her closeness impossible to ignore. The moment balanced on the edge of everything we had tried to suppress. Just for that night, nothing else mattered. The kiss came naturally, like something unfinished finally allowed to happen. Taran pulled me closer, and for a brief moment, I felt held, safe, wanted in a way that erased the past weeks completely. Then everything shattered. A sudden flash cut through the darkness, sharp and blinding. The moment froze instantly. My phone vibrated in my hand, the unknown number already familiar enough to make my stomach drop. The image loaded slowly, painfully clear. All of us caught in that moment, no room for denial, no way to explain it away. Another message followed, blunt and merciless. A promise that the truth, or at least their version of it, would be exposed to everyone. Taran took the phone from me, her composure cracking as she read. Her fingers moved quickly, demanding to know what was wanted. The response came just as fast: exposure, judgment. A belief that what we had done was wrong, something that deserved to be dragged into the light, then a condition, a meeting. Alone, an address followed. a nearby coffee shop. A warning attached, any deviation, and everything would be sent out. There was no choice left to make. Sleep never came that night. I lay staring at the image, replaying it again and again, knowing it had already taken control of everything. By morning, the decision had settled into something heavy and unavoidable. Taryn didn't accept it easily. She wanted to come, insisted on it, but the risk was too high. The threat was clear. Any mistake would cost everything. So I went alone. The coffee shop was quiet, almost painfully ordinary. When I stepped inside, I saw her immediately. Recognition hit just as hard as the fear. Someone familiar. Someone I had trusted enough not to question. She waited in the corner, composed, certain. The conversation didn't take long to unravel. Accusations came sharp and direct, shaped by resentment and something deeper. Jealousy, betrayal, maybe both. What she had seen, it all twisted into something she felt justified exposing. Denials didn't matter. Explanations didn't change anything. What she wanted was simple. For me to disappear from their lives completely. Leave the house. Cut every connection beyond what was unavoidable. Remove myself entirely. The alternative was immediate and devastating. The image would be sent everywhere. There was no negotiation in her tone, no room for compromise. Just a deadline and a warning not to reveal her identity. Even suspicion would be enough for her to act. I agreed because there was nothing else I could do. The walk back blurred into something directionless. The only clear thought was the consequence of failure. Not just for me, but for them. By the time I reached the house, the decision had already taken shape. Packing felt mechanical. Clothes, books, everything thrown together without care. Tears blurred everything, but my hands kept moving. They found me before I could finish. Taryn's voice carried fear beneath its sharpness. Kyunggi followed close behind, both of them searching for answers I couldn't give. The truth stayed locked behind the threat, hanging over us. I couldn't tell them who it was. Couldn't risk it. The only thing I could say was that I had to leave. They tried to stop it. Offered help again, anything that could make it easier, but none of it mattered. Accepting it would only drag things out, increase the risk. This had to end. The image couldn't be released. That was the only thing that mattered. So I kept packing, ignoring the way the room felt like it was breaking apart around us. When it was done, I stood at the door with everything I owned reduced to bags and boxes. They watched from the stairs, silent, waiting for something that never came. Another message buzzed through, confirming the decision had been seen, approved. I stepped outside into the cold, the door closing behind me with a finality that echoed. Alone again. The next place was smaller, crowded, filled with noise and clutter, a sharp contrast to what I had just left behind. Standing there, surrounded by chaos, it was impossible not to remember exactly why I had tried so hard to avoid ending up there. But none of that mattered now. Everything else had already been left behind. The apartment closed in the moment I stepped inside. Toys scattered across every surface, noise bouncing off the walls, no privacy, no space to breathe. My aunt came out of the kitchen, drying her hands, her expression shifting quickly from surprise to concern when she saw me standing there with bags at my feet. I told her the building had been sold, that I needed somewhere to stay. My voice sounded distant, hollow, like it didn't belong to me. She didn't hesitate. She pulled me into a hug that I didn't know how to return, my body stiff in her arms. She told me I could stay as long as I needed, then showed me where I would sleep. The couch in the middle of the living room, exposed, temporary. It wasn't much, but it was all there was. That became my reality overnight. Sleep didn't come. The couch sagged in all the wrong places. The kids woke more than once, and the subway beneath the building rattled everything every 20 minutes. My phone lay on the floor beside me, screen dark but heavy with notifications. 17 messages, all from them. I didn't open a single one. Days slipped past without shape or direction. I stopped going to class entirely. The idea of sitting in front of them, pretending nothing existed beyond lectures and assignments, made my chest tighten until breathing felt impossible. Avoidance became easier than facing what I couldn't control. By the 4th day, my aunt noticed. She sat beside me, clearing space on the couch, her voice softer but more serious now. Something in it broke through the wall I had been holding up. The tears came all at once, uncontrollable, pulled from somewhere deep and locked away. She didn't interrupt, didn't push, just let it happen. When I finally found the words, they came in fragments. The courthouse, the paper that bound everything together, the living situation, the threat that forced me out. I left parts unsaid, the ones that felt too exposed to speak aloud. Even without them, it was enough. She listened quietly, then told me I couldn't hide forever. The future was still waiting, whether I was ready for it or not. I had to finish what I started, had to face it instead of running from it. But the thought of returning, of sitting in those rooms and pretending nothing had changed, felt unbearable. The truth pressed in harder than anything else. Not the situation, not the risk, but what I felt. She saw it before I could fully admit it. Said the problem wasn't the act of pretending, but the refusal to accept what was real, that I cared, that it went deeper than I wanted it to. I pulled away from it, tried to shut it down, told myself it didn't matter anymore, that it was already over, but her words stayed. That night, they circled endlessly in my mind. The way Kyungi had looked at me when I left, the crack in Taran's voice when she said my name, the way I kept checking my phone, even while refusing to respond. The truth settled in slowly, undeniable once it did. I loved them, both of them, and I had no idea what to do with that. 2 weeks passed before I forced myself back to campus. Walking into the classroom felt like stepping into something I had abandoned. Every head turned, every movement felt watched. I slipped into my seat, kept my focus down, but the tension didn't ease. A voice cut through it, light on the surface but sharp underneath, pointing out how different I looked, how obvious the weight I was carrying had become. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Kyungi faltered when she saw me, just for a second, before continuing as if nothing had changed. But her eyes kept finding mine, searching for something I couldn't give back. Taran's class felt worse. She stood at the front, composed, controlled, but the strain showed in small ways. The grip on the marker, the tension in her posture. I left the moment it ended, unable to stay any longer than necessary. I made it halfway to the subway before turning in a different direction. My feet carried me back to their street before I could talk myself out of it. Standing in front of the door felt like standing at the edge of something irreversible. Leaving would have been easier. Walking away would have kept everything contained. Instead, I rang the bell. Taran opened the door, surprise flashing across her face. The words came out before I could stop them. Everything I had been holding back spilling over at once. The distance, the pretending, the silence. It wasn't something I could keep up anymore. I couldn't sit in their classes and act like nothing existed between us. I couldn't ignore what I felt. I told her the truth, even though it felt like it might break everything. That I had fallen in love with them. Both of them. That there was no way back to something simple or normal. She didn't turn me away. She stepped aside. Inside, Kyungi froze when she saw me. The shock clear before it softened into something else. Apologies came out first, clumsy and incomplete, followed by the truth of how lost I had been without them. They had felt it too. The absence, the silence, the uncertainty of not knowing where I was or if I was okay. Nothing about it had been easy for them either. But it didn't change the reality of what we were facing. Staying wasn't an option. Not with everything hanging over us. I couldn't be part of their lives like that. Not without consequences that would destroy more than just me. I only needed them to understand that it had meant something. That it hadn't been temporary or shallow or easy to walk away from. Kyungi closed the distance first, pulling me into an embrace that broke whatever control I had left. The release came all at once, everything I had been holding back collapsing under the weight of it. Taran stood nearby, watching, her own composure slipping in quiet ways. Eventually, the moment had to end. Leaving felt just as heavy as it had the first time, but there was no other choice. They asked me to stay the night. Just that. No promises beyond it. No expectations. Exhaustion made the decision for me. Morning came too quickly. Standing at the door again felt like repeating something unfinished. They walked me out, offering quiet reassurance that somehow, some way, things could still be figured out. Hope, fragile but present. Then my phone buzzed. The message erased it instantly. The warning had been ignored. The consequence followed immediately. The image had already been released. Screens filled with it. Messages multiplied faster than they could be read. Group chats, campus pages, private conversations turned public. Every notification another confirmation that there was no containing it anymore. Their phones started going off too. Calls, emails, official messages stacking on top of each other. Everything was unraveling in real time. Shock held us in place for a moment, the reality settling in piece by piece. Then Taran moved, pulling us back inside, locking the door as if it could still keep anything out. Control was already gone. Calls from administration came through. Messages from colleagues. Reactions from people who didn't know the truth, only what the image suggested. Judgment spread faster than explanation ever could. Comments filled the spaces beneath the image, assumptions made without hesitation. Blame shifted, twisted into something simpler for others to understand. Kyungi sank onto the couch, the weight of it pressing down all at once. Taryn stayed standing, holding on to what little composure she could, even as everything around her fractured. It felt like the end of everything they had built, but not everything was gone. In the middle of it, something still remained, fragile, uncertain, but real. Each other. An official message came through soon after. Urgent. Mandatory. A meeting set for the next morning, legal counsel advised the investigation had escalated. Every detail would be examined now. Messages, grades, the living situation. And beneath all of it, the one truth we had never revealed. The document that made everything more complicated than anyone could assume. It couldn't stay hidden anymore. If they found it first, the story would be taken out of our hands completely. The only option left was to tell it ourselves. The truth sounded impossible even as we said it out loud. A mistake that turned into something real. A situation no one would believe without question, but it was still the truth. So we sat together and wrote it out, piece by piece, stripping away anything that sounded like an excuse. No softening, no avoidance, just honesty, even if it sounded unbelievable. When it was finished, the weight of it settled in. There was no undoing any of this. I reached for their hands across the table, holding on to the only certainty left between us. Together. Taryn sent it, sleeve never came. The three of us stayed in the living room as darkness slowly gave way to a pale gray morning. Words drifted in and out, sometimes spoken, sometimes left hanging in the silence. Being there together felt more important than anything we could say. As dawn settled in, Kyungi's voice broke through softly, her concern turning toward me and what would happen next. The possibility hung heavy in the air, but Taryn cut it off before it could grow. She insisted I hadn't done anything wrong, her tone firm despite everything closing in around us. The truth pressed back immediately. I hadn't been innocent in it. I had crossed the line with them. Taryn corrected it without hesitation, shifting the weight away from me and onto themselves. They were the ones in positions of power, the ones who would carry the consequences. Guilt tightened in my chest until it was hard to breathe. It felt like everything traced back to me, to the moment I came back, to the choices I made. Kyungi stopped that spiral instantly, her voice sharper than before, refusing to let me take it all on alone. This hadn't been one-sided. Every step had been chosen together. Taryn's voice softened then, quieter but more certain. Careers could be rebuilt, titles could be replaced. Losing those things wouldn't break them. Losing me would. The words broke something open. Tears came without resistance this time. They held me as the first light of morning filled the room, grounding me in something that still felt real despite everything else falling apart. We walked to campus side by side, openly, for the first time. The reaction was immediate. Whispers, stares, phones lifting to capture what was already spreading everywhere. Every instinct pushed toward hiding, toward turning back, but a brief brush of Taryn's hand against mine steadied me enough to keep moving. The meeting room was cold and impersonal, the kind of place designed to strip everything down to facts and consequences. The dean sat across from us, the Title IX officer beside him, along with a lawyer who watched everything carefully. We took our seats together. They had already read our statement, verified the document that complicated everything further. What had begun as an error had turned into something real, and that was what mattered now. The words that followed were direct, clinical, and heavy. Boundaries had been crossed, policies violated, trust broken. There was no room left to argue that. Kyungi accepted it quietly. There was no denial left to offer. When the focus shifted to me, the questions became more precise. Whether there had been pressure, coercion, anything that could suggest I hadn't chosen this freely. The answer came immediately. There had been none. If anything, I had been treated more strictly, not less. It didn't change the reality of the imbalance. It didn't erase the problem in their eyes. I tried to push back, to explain that it had been my choice, but a small touch under the table from Taryn stopped me. Not here. Not like this. The conversation moved on to the source of everything unraveling. The messages, the threats, the person behind them. I showed what I had, the proof of being watched, of being pushed into silence. It shifted the tone briefly, reframing part of the situation as something else entirely, harassment, something punishable in its own right. But it didn't undo what had already happened. Consequences came quickly after that. Taryn was given the option to step down before being formally removed. Kyunggi's position ended immediately. Years of work reduced to a few sentences, futures redirected without warning. For me, the outcome was different, but still isolating. I would finish my degree, but not on campus. No return to classrooms, no normal ending. Everything would continue from a distance, marked by what had happened. And one final requirement remained. The legal tie between us had to be erased. When it ended, we left together, but the hallway felt longer than it had any right to. The aftermath moved fast. The person responsible faced consequences of their own, but it didn't undo the damage already done. We found ourselves at the same door where everything had once begun. The same place, but nothing about it felt the same. Leaving became inevitable again. This time, there was no argument strong enough to change it. Distance wasn't a choice anymore. It was necessary. The paperwork came weeks later, signed without words, finalized without ceremony. Then I walked away. Time passed, long enough for everything to settle into something quieter, but not long enough to forget. When the call came, unexpected and uncertain, it brought everything back in an instant. Meeting them again felt different. The tension that once defined everything had softened. They had changed, adapted, rebuilt in ways they hadn't expected. New paths, new work, new lives. But one thing hadn't shifted. They hadn't let go of me. The truth came out simply, without hesitation. What had been taken away legally hadn't erased what they felt. It hadn't erased what any of us felt. This time, there was no imbalance hanging over us. No institution to answer to. No hidden weight shaping every choice. Just three people standing in front of each other, deciding what came next. I said yes. Walking away together felt entirely different from before. There was no fear following us, no eyes watching, no consequences waiting just out of sight. Only the quiet realization that this time it was entirely ours. Back inside that familiar space, everything felt both the same and completely changed. The distance of months lingered between us at first, an invisible barrier built from time and separation. Conversation bridged it slowly. Stories of what had been lost, what had been rebuilt, what had been endured alone. Each piece shared brought us closer again, rebuilding something that had never fully disappeared. The truth settled in again, just as strong as before. None of us had moved on. We had only been waiting. When the distance finally gave way, it wasn't rushed or desperate. It was careful, certain, grounded in everything we had already been through. Familiarity returned in small gestures, in the way hands found each other again, in the quiet understanding that nothing needed to be hidden anymore. What followed wasn't about urgency or escape. It was about presence. About choosing each other without fear, without pressure, without anything external shaping the moment. For the first time, it felt entirely real. Every movement carried care, every touch measured by trust instead of hesitation. The closeness between us wasn't only physical. It was something deeper, something built from everything we had survived to reach that moment. Safety and vulnerability existed side by side, no longer in conflict. When the tension finally gave way, it didn't shatter. It softened. We held on to each other through it, breath uneven, names slipping out quietly, almost reverently. There was no distance left, no fear waiting at the edges. Only the feeling of being complete in a way none of us had managed alone. We stayed there afterward, tangled together, letting the silence settle around us. No one rushed to speak. The quiet said enough. Eventually, the words came, the ones that had been held back for too long. I said them softly, unsure how they would land, but unable to keep them inside any longer. The response was immediate, certain, leaving no space for doubt. It came from both of them, different voices carrying the same truth. What we felt was no longer something fragile or uncertain. It was real, spoken, undeniable. Sieve came easily after that, the kind that only follows when nothing is left unresolved. We stayed wrapped together, the world outside fading into something distant and unimportant. Morning light crept in slowly, pulling me awake. I was still between them, their presence grounding, familiar in a way that made it hard to move. For a moment, I didn't want to disturb anything. Kyunggi stirred first, her expression soft as she looked at me, the quiet of the moment stretching comfortably between us. The day began gently, without urgency, without tension. The kitchen felt different in daylight, less like a place of memories and more like something lived in, something real. Coffee brewed. Breakfast came together easily. I watched them move around each other with a rhythm that had existed long before I returned. They had built something here on their own. Now they were opening it to include me. The question of what came next settled into the space between us. Not heavy, not urgent, just waiting. Taryn placed a cup in front of me. her answer turning the question back toward me, giving me the choice instead of defining it for me. There were practical things to figure out: work, distance, schedules. But beneath all of it was something simpler, an invitation, not out of necessity, not because of circumstance. Because they wanted it. The weight of that settled slowly, bringing with it a quiet certainty. I thought about where I had been, the cramped space, the distance, the feeling of not belonging anywhere. Then I looked at them, at what we had rebuilt together. The answer came naturally. Yes, but this time it would be done right. No rushing, no scrambling to survive. A deliberate step forward, chosen and planned. They agreed without hesitation. There was no urgency anymore, no pressure. Just time, intention, and something steady enough to grow without fear. When it was time to leave, they walked me to the door. The goodbye felt different from before. Lighter, temporary, already filled with the certainty of seeing each other again. Plans replaced uncertainty. Tomorrow wasn't a question. It was already decided. Outside I paused, looking back at them standing there, no longer distant, no longer something I had lost. I pulled out my phone, sent a simple message, something small but grounding. Then added another thought, half playful, half serious. Something about making things official again someday. Their replies came instantly, full of the same certainty I felt. For the first time, the idea didn't feel complicated or impossible. It felt like something we could choose, freely, without anything forcing our hands. The future wasn't clear. It never would be. But that uncertainty didn't feel threatening anymore. What mattered was simple. We had chosen each other. And that was enough. The story didn't end with everything intact. It cost more than any of us expected. Careers, reputations, the lives we had carefully built. None of that could be undone. But standing there, with nothing hidden and nothing left unsaid, it didn't feel like loss. Some things ask for permission. This never did. It only asked whether we were willing to choose it anyway. We were. And we did. No regrets.